Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Ivy English. I'm Bruce.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
Today, August 4th, we have a couple short articles for you. We feel they are important and interesting, so you can learn not only more English, but about the world around us. Our first short article is called Tokyo 2020 Games Delayed a Year.
我们的中文标题是新冠疫情延烧，东京奥运延期一年。
I'll read through this long paragraph and then we'll go back to review it, both the English ideas and the Chinese translation. In March, amid the worsening coronavirus pandemic, the Tokyo Olympics were postponed until 2021. The Games, originally scheduled to take place this summer, will still be known as the Tokyo 2020 Games, but will now take place from July 23rd to August 8th, 2021. The Paralympic Games have also been delayed and will run from August 24th to September 5th, 2021. The decision was announced following talks between Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and the International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach. While the news was disappointing, the public was not surprised as the move seemed inevitable. This will be the first Olympics to be postponed. Previously, 3 games have been canceled outright in 1916, 1940, and 1944 due to the 2 world wars.
So, in March, amid the worsening coronavirus pandemic, the Tokyo Olympics were postponed until 2021. The basic sentence is, the Tokyo Olympics were postponed, and we find out that it was in March and that it was amid or during the worsening coronavirus pandemic. Worsening means getting worse, means getting more and more serious. And a pandemic is a infectious disease that is present in more than one country in the world.
好，所以这个句子它的主要的子句是这个 The Tokyo Olympics 就是东京奥运 were postponed 被延期了它这里用的是被动被延期了。那这个是主要句子。那其他的资讯呢，就是开始补充首先我们可以看到 The Olympics were postponed until 被延到什么时候呢？一直延到2021年。那这件事情决定延期什么时候发生的呢？我们可以看到前面一开始他说 in March 在3月的时候，然后呢接下来再告诉你 amid 是一个介系词，就是 in the middle of 的意思或者 among 的意思。所以在什么之间呢？在这个 worsening 越来越严重的 coronavirus 就是冠状病毒这个pandemic 这个是一个大规模的流行在冠状病毒疫情越来越糟糕的时候，在那个当下，那个 amid 可以翻成当下，在那个时候呢，在3月的时候，那大家决定东京奥运要延到2021。
Okay, you may have heard the word, besides pandemic, epidemic, E-P-I, and then after that it's the same as pandemic, D-E-M-I-C, E-P-I, D-E-M-I-C. We discussed this earlier, and pandemic is something that occurs over maybe the whole world, but certainly a very, very large area. An epidemic is the occurrence of a disease, usually suddenly and intensely, in a limited area.
So you can remember the difference between epidemic and pandemic because pandemic has a P for passport. That is a joke.
非常有趣那这个地方呢，我们讲到2个字一个是 epidemic， 那一个是 pandemic。那这2个字呢都是传染病但是epidemic 这个 epi 就是 upon 的意思那所以它比较局部它不是像这个 pandemic 那样子这个散播非常远，因为 pandemic 那个 pan 这个字首就是 all 的意思所以 pandemic 散布得很远。那 epidemic 它的也是流行传染病，可是它这个区域比较有局限那刚刚 Angela 老师讲到一个很有趣的一个 帮你记忆的方法，就是 pandemic 它有 passport 啊，因为都是 P 开头的，所以它有护照，它可以到处跑，所以它可能会就例如说全球性的疫情，那就是 pandemic 啊，但是 epidemic 是 local 的。
Is it too late to revoke the coronavirus's passport? Also, who issued that?
Yeah, revoke, R-E-V-O-K-E, revoke 就是召回，或者是如果受持是护照的话，就是取消他的护照啊。有没有人可以把这个护照，把这个coronavirus 的护照取消掉啊，让他不能跑出去啊
Okay, continuing, the games, originally scheduled to take place this summer, that would refer to this year 2020, will still be known as the Tokyo 2020 Games, but will now take place from July 23rd to August 8th, 2021, which of course is next year. Scheduled to take place, with the scheduled, they were scheduled to take place this year, but because of the pandemic, they have been postponed, delayed for 1 year.OK,
我们可以看到这个句子它的主词哈 ，the games 啊，就是指这个奥林匹克这个运动会呢，originally scheduled to take place 啊，那 this summer， 那这个是一个插入的一个片语，那其实是一个那个关系代名词子句简化来的啊，它是 which were originally scheduled to take place this summer， 那 which were 关系代名词跟那个 be 动词一起省略掉了啊，所以。这是第一点。第二点，各位要记得 be scheduled to do 啊，或者 to 这个 take place 就是预定要发生、预定要举行的意思。所以 originally 是本来，所以这个运动会呢，本来预定是要 this summer 就今年夏天要举行的。好，这是插入的一个资讯。然后呢，这句话真正的主要动词是 will still be known as 啊，那个这个今年要举行的，但是现在延期的，那怎么办呢？但是告诉大家，现在它的名字仍然是好 Tokyo 2020 Games 好，但是呢，它现在will now take place， 现在会什么时候发生？什么时候举行呢？会在2021年的7月23号到8月8号之间举行。
Now, we have the Paralympic Games, and they have also been delayed and will run from August 24th to September 5th, 2021. What are the Paralympic Games? Well, para means relating to. So they're relating to the Olympic Games. What are they relating about? The Paralympic Games are for people with disabilities to compete against each other.
好，所以这个 Paralympic 这个 para 就是和什么有关哈 relating to， 所以这个 Paralympic 我们把中文现在把它翻成帕林匹克运动会哈 Paralympic Games。 好，那这个帕林匹克运动会呢，其实是为身心障碍者所举办的一个综合型的国际体育赛事哈。那奥运延到明年的，那帕林匹克运动会呢 have also been delayed， 也延到了也延期了啊。然后呢 will run 就是进行，但这也是进行的意思，不是跑步，是进行的意思。它会在2021的8月24号到9月5号之间进行。
All right, continuing. The decision was announced, that is, the decision to delay or postpone the Olympics 1 year. Here, announce means to formally say something. So through the media or giving a very important speech, you will announce something. After following talks between Japan's Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, and the International Olympic Committee President, Thomas Bach. I don't know if Thomas Bach is an American or Englishman or German, but he is president of
that much we know
of a committee which is called the International Olympic Committee.
OK, 那 the decision 就是要延期的这个决定 was announced 被正式的宣布。Following 在这里就是 after 哈，通常是 immediately after 哈。那所以这个宣布是在什么时候宣布呢？在 talks between A and B 哈。那 talk 在这里是会谈的意思啊 ，a formal discussion 啊。所以在 A 跟 B 他们有一个正式会谈之后啊，这个发表了这样的宣布了这样的一个决定。那 A 跟 B 是谁呢？是谁跟谁会谈呢？啊，一方会谈的一边是日本的首相啊，这个安倍。那另外一边呢是国际奥林匹克委员会的主席啊，那叫 Thomas Bach 啊。他们两个人的会谈之后 然后就宣布了这个决定。
While the news was disappointing, everyone was like, oh, man. But the public was not surprised. We weren't like, what? Why would they do that? Because the move seemed inevitable. If something is inevitable, it means it's going to come no matter what, and everyone knows it. We all thought, well, yep, that was likely.
Yeah, inevitable 就是 impossible to avoid 啊，或者 impossible to prevent， 所以这个一定会发生的事情啊 ，certain to happen。好，所以我们可以看到了这个地方讲到说 ，wow， 就是虽然呢这个 news 是 disappointing 啊，就是这个让人家觉得啊好失望啊，哎呀，这个奥运会盼了4年了，结果啊要延期了。啊，所以一方面呢，虽然大家都觉得蛮失望的，但是 the public 就是大众呢 was not surprised 啊，各位注意到 the public 虽然意思是复数的大众，但是各位看到它的 be 动，它的这个 be 动词还是用单数的哈，还是视为单数，因为你把它视为一个集合啊，所以呢，这个 the public was not surprised 啊，这个大家没有很讶异啊。As the move， 因为这个举动 move 就是一个举动啊，或者就是指这个决定啊。那因为这个举动 seemed 感觉起来好像是怎么样呢？好像是 inevitable， 是无法避免的啊，因为这个疫情这么严重。
All right, let's continue. This will be the first Olympics to be postponed. I think we've already mentioned this. Postponed means to delay. So they will hold the 2020 Olympics, but they will hold it in 2021.
好，那 this 就是这一次这个延期啊，或者这一次这个被延期的奥运呢 ，will be the first Olympics 啊，这是将会是第一个这个奥运会呢 to be postponed， 就是将会发生、将会被延期的第一个这个 Olympics 啊，因为这个事情还没发生。
So this is the first Olympics to be delayed, but it is not the first Olympics to be affected by world events, because previously 3 games have been canceled outright. This word emphasizes that the cancel is a complete cancellation, not a single event was held in other places. It is a complete and thorough cancellation. And also, I have a feeling it's like a sudden feeling about it as well. To cancel something outright is like, bam. It just feels very emphatic that it was canceled.
Ordered, no discussion.
Oh, yeah.
So in that sense, it happened very quickly.
Yes. And then, but these cancellations happened in 1916, which would be the First World War, 1940 and 1944, which would be the Second World War, and these were due to the 2 world wars.
好，所以呢 previously 先前 3 games 有3届的奥运会呢 have been cancelled 被取消的啊，而且是被怎么样取消呢 outright。好 outright 就是 in a full and complete way 的意思啊，所以这个所有的都取消了，所有的这个比赛通通取消了啊，就完全取消掉了。同时呢，也有点 outright 有一点感觉就是这么取消了啊，就那个通通取消了，所以有一点感觉就像中文讲就直接就取消掉了啊。那这分别是在1916、1940、1944啊，显然是因为第一次跟第二次世界大战。好，那接下来这里也有讲 due to the 2 world wars， 因为2次的大战，所以曾经取消过3次。
Okay, let's move on to the next page and our second article. Ozone recovery reverses jet stream damage.
我们的中文标题是臭氧层破洞减小，南极气流渐趋正常啊。这个 title 里面的 recovery 就是一个回复或者复原哈，所以 ozone 就是臭氧层，好，臭氧层它的复原哈，那 reverses 就是使某样东西逆转啊，或者使它回复的意思哈。那使什么逆转呢？使得这个 jet stream 哈，就是高速气流啊，它是数条好几条围绕地球的强而且很窄的高速气流带啊，那它使这高速气流带怎么把它 reversed 啊，让它回到原来的位置去了啊，那或者是复原了它的 damage 它所造成的损害。
Okay, earlier this year, scientists announced that the southern jet stream had stopped shifting south and was possibly moving to its normal position. The scientific community noted that the change was due to efforts following the United Nations 1987 Montreal Protocol to eliminate the use of chemicals that damage the ozone layer. For decades, the thin ozone layer near the South Pole altered wind patterns, which in turn drove the jet stream south. Last year, images showed that the ozone hole's peak size was the lowest in more than 35 years. Scientists expect that the jet stream's return to normal will mean more rain and less carcinogenic ultraviolet light in southern Chile and Argentina, and fewer droughts in Australia. Unfortunately, in March, a rare ozone hole opened over the Arctic, though it was expected to disappear within weeks.
So, earlier this year, amidst everything else that's been going on, scientists announced that the southern jet stream had stopped shifting south and was possibly moving to its normal position. Translation, good news. So what's the southern jet stream? A jet stream is a high-powered river of wind in our air. It's like an ocean current, but for air. And it's a particularly fast one. And there's one in the northern hemisphere, and there's one in the southern hemisphere. And they go around, they kind of determine the barrier between the colder and the less cold areas. This is how the northern hemisphere jet stream works, actually. But I'm not so sure about the southern one. But what had happened is because the ozone layer was depleted, this was somehow causing the southern jet stream to move south, and that was causing problems, of course, with the weather because it was changing weather patterns. And so what they're announcing is that it has stopped shifting south, and it's possibly moving back north to its original normal position. Good news.
好，所以呢，我们可以看到他说这个 earlier this year， 今年稍早的时候呢 ，scientists 就是科学家 announced 宣布什么呢？宣布这个南方的高速气流，哈 ，the southern jet stream had stopped 已经停止 shifting south， 啊 ，shift 就是移动啊，那所以显然它原来是慢慢在往南移，但它现在已经停止了往南移动，而且呢 was possibly 有可能。Moving to its normal position， 有可能正在往它正常的位置移动啊，所以这是个好消息。
The scientific community noted that the change was due to efforts following the United Nations 1987 Montreal Protocol to eliminate the use of chemicals that damage the ozone layer. This tells us perhaps why this is happening, this shift in the jet stream in the southern hemisphere. Back in 1987, as the ozone hole was getting larger and larger and causing a lot of concern, the United Nations held a meeting in Montreal, and they had a conclusion to this meeting that they called the protocol. They would stop or eliminate using certain chemicals that were known to destroy ozone, which we write in chemistry as O3 rather than our usual O2 for normal oxygen molecules. So the scientific community had a position, they brought it to the UN brought it to the world's attention, and they got it passed. And
which is one of the rare successes of environmental activism in this world.
好，所以呢，我们可以看到说，这个地方讲到说 the scientific community 就是科学界，好 ，community 就是一个族群啊，或者在这里我们可以翻成界，好，科学界。那科学界 noted 在这里是指出的意思啊，科学界指出来，好说 the change 这样的改变 was due to 原因是。efforts 一些努力哈，各位注意到那 effort 有加 s 啊，因为是不同的努力。那这些努力怎么样？是 following， 又是跟刚刚我们看到前一篇看到那个 following 一样的意思啊，就是 after 的意思。是在什么之后的一些努力呢？在 the United Nations 这个联合国的1987年的蒙特娄议定书啊，那在这个蒙特娄议定书之后的一些努力啊，是这一次改变的原因。那这个 efforts 目的是干嘛呢？后面还可以接 efforts to do something 啊，就是努力做什么呢？在这里我们看到他努力做的是 eliminate the use of chemicals 好，那 eliminate 就是 get rid of 或者 remove 哈，这 eliminate 这个 e 就是 out 这个字首很常见的哈，那 limi 呢这个字根是 threshold 的意思，就是门槛的意思，所以把它丢到你的门槛外面去，就是不要了哈，把它 get rid of 的意思哈，所以 eliminate 就是消除 the use of chemicals， 也就是 消除使用某一些化学元素啊。那这些化学元素怎么样 ？Chemicals that damage the ozone layer 啊，那这些化学元素它会损害、会破坏臭氧层。好 ，the ozone layer 通常有一个 the 在那边啊 ，the ozone layer 就是臭氧层。
Now, for decades, the thin ozone layer near the South Pole, the fact that it was thin, it's not that the ozone layer altered wind pattern, it was the fact that it was especially thin altered or changed wind patterns. And that, in turn, drove the jet stream south, or pulled it south, I'm going to say, because driving implies that you're behind it.
啊 ，OK， 好，所以我们可以看到说呢，这个 for decades 就是数十年以来。好，这个很薄的这一层臭氧层，好，这个不是因为臭氧层的关系，而是因为臭氧层变薄了，好，所以才会 altered， 主要动词在 alter 就是改变了，好，那这个 wind patterns 就是风的模式，所以这里就会告诉我们说，这个多数十年来的这个南极的附近 near the South Pole 这个南极附近的这个臭氧层薄的臭氧层呢，它改变了风的模式。那 which in turn 其实可以把它理解成为 as a result。好，那 as a result 结果就怎么样呢？它就 drove 啊，这个字呢通常是 push 或者是驱赶啊，但在这里的话看你要从哪一个角度来讲啊。那总之呢就是让这个 jet stream 这个高速气流呢让它往南移动了。
Last year, images showed that the ozone hole's peak size was the lowest in more than 35 years. We learned from this sentence that the size of the ozone layer is not static. It moves, it changes. And good news, as of last year, this peak size, the largest that this hole has been...
Over the course of that year.
Right. Over the course of a year, its largest size was actually the smallest of the largest sizes of the last 35 years.
好，去年 last year images 就是影像 showed 哈，显然他们可能从高空拍或者从哪里拍的一些影像，显示说 the ozone holes 啊，这个就是臭氧层的破洞啊，它的 peak size 就是它最大的那个大小，最大的时候的那个大小啊，叫做 peak size 啊 was the lowest， 结果它最大的时候的大小其实是最低的。in more than 35 years 35年以来就最小，也就是说就算它最大的时候呢，这个最大的时候的这个大小也是35年以来最小的一个。
Scientists expect that the jet stream's return to normal will mean more rain, yay, and less carcinogenic ultraviolet light, yay, in southern Chile and Argentina. And fewer droughts in Australia. So fewer droughts in Australia goes with the more rain. What are we talking about? Carcinogenic ultraviolet light? Carcinogenic. If something is genic, it means it creates it, and carcino means cancer. So it's cancer-creating ultraviolet light. Ultraviolet is UV light, and right now in the coronavirus, everyone loves ultraviolet light because we're using it to sterilize our clothing and other things. But UV light is actually not that good for you. If you have a UV light box, you should not be turning it on unless it's completely enclosed, because UV light is not great for people in high doses because it is carcinogenic or cancer-causing. And because basically what an ozone layer does is it filters UV light to an acceptable level for human beings. But because the ozone layer has been thin, especially in the south, Chile and Argentina have been dealing with way more UV light than is healthy for human beings, and they've been having an epidemic of cancer down there. And so this is a good news, especially for people who live in the south.
好，所以呢，这个科学家 expect that 啊，他们预期呢，这个高速气流的 return to normal 回归平常，回到平常的位置呢 will mean 它的意思或它代表了什么意思呢？就是 more rain 会有更多的降雨，好，然后呢有比较少的 carcinogenic 就是致癌的，好，那个 genic 就跟生成 create 有关，好，前面的 carcino 跟 cancer 有关，所以它也表示呢这个致癌的紫外线啊，在这个南美洲的智利跟阿根廷啊，换句话说，南美洲智利跟阿根廷呢会有比较少的致命的或致癌的紫外线 好，那至于那个更多的雨呢，其实感觉起来是怎么样？是让这个澳洲可以得到利益啊，或者对澳洲是有好处，因为他这里讲到 fewer drought 就是干旱，好，所以让澳洲的干旱呢会比较这个少一点啊，所以这是有好处的。
Unfortunately, in March, a rare ozone hole opened over the Arctic, though it was expected to disappear within weeks.
Basically, it feels to me like the ozone layer just kind of slipped down on the planet for a little bit. It's like, whoops, sorry, let me go back up.
Okay, so just a couple of months ago, there's an ozone layer around the whole planet, but it is thickest in the north and in the southern polar areas. And in the north, that's the Arctic. The south would be the Antarctic. 前面加 A-N-T. Antarctic refers to the southern hemisphere. Arctic is the North Pole. And a hole opened in the northern ozone layer, which is not good news, but it was not expected to last very long at all, and that's good news.
好，所以很不幸的，在3月的时候呢，有一个很少见的 rare， 有一个少见的这个 ozone hole 那个臭氧层的破洞，那 opened 就是打开了或者是出现了，在北极上空出现了。不过 though it was expected to 就是它这个臭氧层的破洞呢，预期会 disappear 会消失 within weeks 就是大概几个礼拜之内就会消失。好，所以这不好啊，但是呢，这个应该是不会这个持续永久的下去。
And in fact, it did disappear. I just checked on that news this morning. It's now back to normal.
Wow, 啊，
Good to know.
Yeah, 事实上它已经回到了正常了。Yeah.
That's it for today's lesson. I'm sorry that we have to bring this to a close, but we'll be back again with